Up, everybody? This is Willie, and today I'm now going to be talking about Survivor 48. So yeah, with the season done, I'm going to run through the story of the season and share my opinions on it, and afterwards, at the end, I'm going to do a semi-ranking on who I think is the best and worst player from the season, and to top it off, I'm going to do a brief reflection on my prediction video to make a comparison on how right and wrong I was with my prediction for the season. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do, and now let's get right into the story. So the season starts off showing a Zoom meeting with the players where they learn that they're going to be on the season, and then we cut to them on the resorted island where they make their way to the marooning, and they're divided into 3 tribes of 6 because it's the new era. So the 3 tribes that we have are known as Siva, Lagi, and Vula. And they compete in their first reward challenge, during which Kevin would injure his shoulder, and in an unaired turn of events, the challenge stopped so he could get medical attention, which he's able to fix up his shoulder. But continuing on, Lagi pulls ahead by miles and wins the reward. So Siva and Vula each have to pick one tribe member to go on a journey to earn the supplies. Kyle goes for Siva and Kevin volunteers for Vula. And on their journey, they face a challenge where they have to do a variety of Survivor-esque tasks before making it to the final part where they have to fill up a glass jug with some water in order to get a key. And while Kyle was leading, he accidentally broke his glass jug with the pot, disqualifying him from the competition, allowing Kevin to win and earn the reward in camp supplies. And so we get to the 3 tribes settling themselves, starting off with Lagi, who obviously won the reward, and we see the 3 boys in Joe, Shaheen, and Thomas quickly bonding and call themselves the California Girls Alliance because they're all from California. Thomas has a good bond with Bianca, who she confides in for trust, while Eva builds a relationship with Joe, confiding in him about her autistic background, which was a very nice, sympathetic moment between the two. Meanwhile, Star, the only person who really doesn't have an ally, blatantly leaves camp to hunt for an idol, which everyone picks up on, putting a target on her back. Next up with Siva, they unfortunately have no camp supplies because Kyle couldn't win it for them, but they still settled themselves the best, where they even make some discoveries of some clues and symbols that were displayed around their camp. Meanwhile, we get more insight on their dynamics after seeing a conversation between Charity and Camilla, where the former expresses on her concerns on Kyle, which Camilla happens to have a bond with when we see that they have a lot in common. So Camilla retells this to Kyle, and the two of them gather David and Chrissy to form a pact to target Charity. And then with Vula, Kevin comes back pleasing his tribe mates for winning the supplies, and after that we see Say immediately get to work with forming an alliance with the guys in Cedric, Justin, and Kevin, and they become a strong 4, leaving Mary and Steph on the outs. But Kevin takes his time to form a bond with Mary, where the two puts a lot of trust in each other. Then continuing with Say, she finds the Beware advantage, and it is a word code where the clues come from a piece of parchment and the symbols of animals that were displayed around her camp. And with the help of her alliance, Say is able to crack the code and get the idol. Afterwards, the 3 tribes compete in their first immunity challenge, where Vula ultimately loses after Steph and Kevin fumble on the puzzle pieces despite being a few pieces ahead of Siva. So they head back to camp, where because Steph was responsible for fumbling with the puzzle and not being in alliance unlike Kevin, she's easily the target for the vote. Steph is aware of her potential dangers, and she and Mary try to rally in Justin and Kevin to vote for Say, who they see as a player who just played way too quick, which leaves Kevin and Justin in the middle, where the two bond over it. So the Vula tribe head to the first tribal council, where things do get somewhat heated between Steph and Sayonia. But after they vote, Steph showed that she somewhat had the right read on where the votes were going and had played her shot in the dark, which ultimately did not work, and she would be the first person voted out of Survivor 48, with Mary being the only one left out. After tribal, Mary is now on the bottom for Vula, with Say being openly against her, being shielded by the power structure she has, and so she fought, considering the likes of Kevin still wants to take a shot at her because she's in possession of an idol. Then at Lagi, everyone is pretty much have a bond except for Star. So what happens when a person is on the outs? They go looking for an idol, and guess what? Stars finds the Beware advantage that leads to the idol. And it's a different style of code cracking, but still requires the use of symbols around camp to help her solve it. But furthermore, she confides in everyone but Eva about her idol find. However, Joe does inform Eva about Star's idol, which is pretty disastrous to them since they now have to help out the player on the bottom to find an idol, which Thomas does menacingly suggest to try and chuck away the clue since Star gave it to Shaheen, but he disagreed and saw through Thomas's schemes. While on Siva, the tribe is just bonding, and then a boat comes over to all 3 tribe camps where one member must go on a journey. and this time they'll be determining it by a special number they hold out. And so by the end of it, Thomas, Mitch, and Mary go on a journey, and once they meet, they go over to do a challenge to win an advantage, or if they do lose, they lose their vote. And Mary unfortunately loses hers, while Mitch and Thomas earn theirs, which Mitch gets a vote block, while Thomas gets to steal a vote. And so all three journey people head back to camp and tell them what happened. And we stick with Siva for a bit. We see that Mitch and Charity have a bond, but knowing from a viewer's perspective, they are both on the outs because the other four are in the majority, and they decide to go find an idol. And Kyle finds it, and with the help of Camilla cracking the code for him, he's able to retrieve it. So then it's time for the immunity challenge, and Vula unfortunately loses again because Cedric continued to lean back while bouncing on the beam. And so back at camp, Cedric takes full responsibility for the tribe loss, but his social skills avoid him from being on the chopping block. And with that, Mary is still on the firing line, with the vote being up to this point between her and Say. And Kevin still continues to push for Say, trying to get the boys together to blindside her with her idol. However, Cedric has a really strong bond with Say, so he goes and reports Kevin to her, but still tries to push for the Mary vote, even though now Say knows Kevin is gunning for her and wants him out instead. Justin and Cedric chat about it, and they now consider going for Kevin instead, considering players like him usually come out top with these moves, so to avoid that potential, they could just cut him loose. And so Vula heads to Tribal, where Mary and Seonia continue their banter, and then the players go to vote with Mary not getting to do so, and Say decides to play her idol thanks to Cedric's instructions, and she nullifies Kevin's vote against her, while she, Cedric, and Justin blindside Kevin. After that, the Vula tribe returned to camp, where Mary is still on the bottom, but Sai is now skeptical of Justin and Cedric, considering she was instructed to play her idol, but it turns out she didn't need to. So that raised a lot of red flags about their relationship. And continuing to the next day, Say proceeds to babysit Mary as she tries to go hunt for an idol, and it gets to the point where Mary starts dashing through the forest with Say right on her trail. And for some reason, despite all the searching, no idol was ever found. On Siva, we see that Kyle has now found himself in a middle position between two sides who gravitate to him as a number. Mitch and Charity want him as their third, while Camilla, Chrissy, and David want him on their side. So Kyle is in a really good position. And then Logie, Joe gets his heroic moment of building a giant bonfire, while Star is continuing to crack the code for her idol, but to no avail. And Ava, someone who Star doesn't trust, tries to engage with her in a game chat, talking about potentially taking out some affable players, which Star sees right through her and goes to retell them in the likes of Bianca and Thomas, to where the three of them start some sort of pact against Eva, who one has been scheming, and two has been blatantly making her relationship with Joe so apparent when she gives a gift to him to share with his family in front of everyone. So then it's time for immunity, and unsurprisingly, Beulah takes another loss again. But before the tribes can head back to camp, three people must go on a journey because that's how the new era functions. And so the three people that are going on the journey are Justin, Bianca, and Camilla. And for their journey task, they must individually participate in a luck-based sort of mini game where they must roll some dice, and if they get 4 flames, they earn an advantage, or else roll 4 skulls and you lose your vote. How lovely. And what do you know? Bianca and Justin lose their votes, while Camilla earns herself an extra vote. So heading back to Vula, Mary is unsuccessful with her idol search, so she decides to play it off as if she does have one, and behaves casually like she isn't going home that night, which by seeing this, Say is sus about it and speculates Mary in possession of something, so she wants to split her vote on Justin, which Cedric tries to turn her down on, because he has a strong relationship with Justin since the beginning. So then Say tries to interrogate Mary in a way to get a read on her, and Mary still acts normal, which does make Say feel compelled to split the vote. But anyways, they go to Tribal, and boy would it be a historic Tribal, like they said in the preview, where after they vote, Mary indeed plays something, which is the shot in the dark. And guess what? She was successful! And she nullifies all the 2 votes against her, meaning Say did not split on Justin, which she probably should have to begin with. But now we go to revote, where Mary and Justin can't vote, so it's Say and Cedric, and Say votes for Justin while Cedric votes for Say. And so they're revoting again, and because the rule we've learned last season where a person in a tie can vote if their opponent does not have a vote. So we see Say cast her vote for Justin while Cedric still votes for her, and it's deadlocked, meaning now it all comes down to Cedric, who he decides to go home. And obviously he just betrayed Say by voting for her, but she does some great campaigning to him that really convinces him to save her, but on one condition: if she tries to repair her relationship with Mary, which she willingly does so, and Justin accepts his fate and Cedric lets him go, sending him out of the most insane tribals to ever occur. The next morning, all three Vula members go idol searching, during which Mary and Say start to form a bit of a game bond, which really shifted things up a bit. And then the tribes meet up together, where Jeff announces it's time for a tribe swap. So they drop their buffs and they're assigned new tribes, where Vula 2.0 comprises of 3 ex-Logi, coincidentally the California girls, and 2 ex-Siva, which also coincidentally is the duo of Kyle and Camilla. Then for Logi 2.0, it comprises 1 ex-Vula, 2 ex-Logi in Eva and Star, who are rival with each other, and 2 ex-Siva. And lastly for Siva 2.0, it contains 2 ex-Vulas, 2 ex-Sivas, and 1 ex-Logi in Bianca. So all 3 swap tribes head to their newly assigned tribe camps, where we shall start off with Vula 2.0, where the California girls are pretty much united, leaving out Camilla and Kyle on the bottom, who Repair themselves have a plan to try and stay distant with each other to make it seem like they were not close from the beginning, which does seem to work on the California girls. And then the pair gives some pretty unique insight about the journey, and since Thomas did go on it, it does raise suspicions on if he has an advantage and he was just lying to the California girls, which he is, but he denies it when they address it to him. Then with Logi 2.0, Eva and David create a bond where Infirmer does acknowledge that she has no relationship with her fellow ex-Logi in Star, and at the same time, David also acknowledges to her that he doesn't have a relationship with his fellow ex-Siva in Charity, who was going to be the first one out if they went to Tribal. And then on Siva 2.0, Bianca, being the only Logi member, is pretty much on the outs, and by Chrissy's demand, she labels her as an easy vote if they go to Tribal. However, there are some bonds being made where Cedric and Mitch form some kind of connection, while Say, behind Cedric's back, talks about how she's losing trust with him after he tried to vote her out the last Tribal. Then we get to Immunity, where Vula 2.0 initially completes the puzzle, but then they have something wrong, which causes them to peter out and lose the challenge. What an unexpected turn of events, with Vula continuing their losing streak just without any ex-Vula members on it. So they head back to camp, and Kyle and Camilla continued their bait to the California girls, trying to act desperate and campaign to them why they should stay. But, unbeknownst to the California girls, Kyle and Camilla both possess some sort of advantage, where they plan to use it and take out Thomas. Then, the California girls decide that they're gonna plan to get rid of Kyle, and they make it blatant when they search through his bag in front of Camilla, which they somehow couldn't even find his idol despite it being in there. And thanks to Camilla alerting Kyle about what happened, he has a great sense of where the votes are landing. So they go to Tribal, and Kyle plays his idol on himself, and him and Camilla vote out Thomas with the steal vote in his pocket. After that, Kyle and Camilla feel a good amount of gratification for their masterclass deception that worked on the California girls, but unfortunately they still used up their extra vote, so in case of another Tribal, they are coming in 2-2. For the reward challenge, Logi and Vula 2.0 win it, and before they head off, Say from Siva 2.0 chips in her speech about the challenge loss, which does rub some people the wrong way, especially Chrissy, which we see when they return. Chrissy is just expressing her disdain towards Say's behavior, now wanting to shift her target from Bianca to Say. Say, on the other hand, has the same feelings for Chrissy and prioritizes getting her out when she has the opportunity to do so. Then we go off to Vula 2.0, where they're enjoying their first challenge triumph, where they get to enjoy some of the feast and share a heart-to-heart moment with each other about their past, which is a nice touching scene. Then finally to Logi 2.0, they obviously go to the sanctuary to enjoy their reward meal, and everything is just surface level. Besides this one little substance of Charity trying to express her satisfaction, which Eva, in confessional, takes the impression that Charity is just being fake about it, further developing Charity's complete delusion in the game. At Immunity, Vula 2.0 completes it first, while Logi 2.0 struggles because Eva kinda has a freak-out moment during the final stage of the challenge, but thanks to Joe's encouragement, which is on another tribe, and they're not allowed to usually interact with opposing tribes. However, production allowed it, and thanks to that, Eva was able to maintain her momentum and score the final point for her team, which means Siva 2.0 loses and are going to Tribal. But before the tribes head off, we get a really heartwarming moment where Jeff reflects on Joe's encouragement with Eva that has helped her succeed in the challenge, which brings Eva to finally open up that she has autism and shares it with everyone and talks about the struggles she has with it. And Jeff does indeed sob when he listens more deeply about this story. After that, we get back with Vloggy 2.0, where Eva continues to reflect on her heartwarming moment, which has brought a lot more people closer to her, especially Star, who now wants to work with her and shares about her idol to everyone, which they help out crack the code, and Eva's the one that's able to do so and get it opened, and Star willingly allows Eva to take her idol. So after that, we join in with the losing tribe, where it's a blatant battle between Chrissy and Say on the numbers they have to vote each other out, where Say's side is a little bit more wonky since Cedric, the only other person she trusts, is someone that she still is iffy about, which definitely is an issue. While Chrissy's side, she has Mitch, and she's gonna try and rally in Cedric as well, which is really bad for Say. But Bianca, who still doesn't have her vote, is somehow lucking her way out of the situation and is almost gonna do so, but after getting info from both sides, she recognizes that there's a tie potentially in play, but worries that if she does share she doesn't have a vote, she'll just end up being sniped out. And what do you know, she still ends up doing it by telling Cedric, which now opens up his new idea that he could just snipe out Bianca right there. And at Tribal, we get back the infamous 2-1-1 plurality vote, where the votes are split among Chrissy, Say, and Bianca, and the final vote is casted for Bianca, which she is devastatingly taking out in this spot. So then heading back to camp, Cedric makes his explanation to Say about his involvement in Bianca's blindside, which he explains in confessional that he whispered to Chrissy to also cast a vote against Bianca that would solidify her elimination that night. Then the following day, all three tribes get tree mail where they're told that they've reached the merge phase. But obviously it's not going to be easy because that's how New Era works. So all the tribes meet up in one beach, and of course the first thing that they're going to start off is with a twist, and it's just like last season where there's a sign that tells them that there is an advantage that is hidden around the jungle, so everyone goes scurrying around for it. And it is first spotted by Charity, but then out of nowhere, Say dashes right past her and gets it. So with that, Say is now in possession of the advantage and will reveal what it is at the challenge. Meanwhile, we spend some time with some strategy talk where the likes of Eva and Joe want to work with more muscular men like Kyle, David, and Shaheen. So that's going to be a pack moving forward. And then we see someone like Eva being targeted because she's in possession of an idol, since it's obviously public and some people have already spilled it out to the rest of the cast. So the most obvious prime targets coming into the merge are Charity because she has no one besides Mitch, and Say because she's just Say. So then it's immunity challenge, and as always, they're going to be split in two teams. But like 47, the winning team will compete in a separate individual challenge where the one person who wins earns immunity. And Say's advantage obviously is skipping the team phase. So let's get to the point. Kyle's team win the first challenge, and Kyle himself wins the individual immunity in the second challenge. Which finally, this filming cycle had two players named Kyle win the first immunity back-to-back seasons. But anyways, the vote is coming down between Say and Charity, where a certain amount of people prefer Say to go, but some others would rather see Charity gone, especially since a SIVA member hasn't gone yet. So with the vote being kind of rigid with who's going home, the vote commences, and in a close vote between Say and Charity, with Say casting one random vote on Cedric, she still ended up staying over Charity, whom just didn't see her blindside coming. Post-tribal, Cedric is very puzzled by the one random vote he got, which Say obviously admitted it was her in confessional as a way to sort of get revenge on Cedric for the previous times he went against her. And to avoid being blatantly caught, she used different penmanship so that it isn't legible whose writing it is, which is kind of an innovative play. But here we do learn that there's a majority that has been formed, and the people that are on the out are Mitch, Say, and surprisingly Cedric. So it's any of the three of them that are primed to be the next one to go. But here we do see Shaheen starting to gain a bit more agency as people who are not on the outs are approaching him as a number, which although he's not going to stick with them, at least it shows Shaheen as someone who is going to be gravitated to as an ally down the road. So next the players arrive at the immunity challenge where, guess what? Double tribal, two people going home. One will be a preacher and one will make jury. So the players are divided into two groups of 6, where it's the color configuration of orange and purple, where Joe wins for the orange team, but he ultimately drops out before the last person on the purple team does, who is David, and he wins immunity on that team. So orange is going to go first, and with Say and Mitch on the team being the two people on the bottom, it's an easy vote between the two, which the two themselves don't even want to work with each other. So yes, Say does rub people the wrong way. However, there is some merit to taking out Mitch considering the threat level he's growing, and especially his story of stuttering, which is what wins a jury's heart. It definitely becomes a big threat down the road that needs to be taken out as soon as they can. And in the last few minutes of the strategy talk, we do learn that Mitch is going to use his block vote against Say, so that pretty much dooms her of any chances of playing the shot in the dark. So then on the purple team, they enjoy their reward. Then we see that the vote is going to be an easy Cedric vote. However, Kyle and Camilla have a plan of their own where they begin to view Shaheen as an incoming threat, and since Cedric is going to vote for him, they could take this opportunity to flip on Shaheen, but they do need David's consent. Ray chat with him about Shaheen's sketchiness and frame him for potentially finding an idol as a way to turn David against him, which that magic does seem to work on David, and he is fully content on getting Shaheen out. But it is still up for debate if it even is the right time to do it, or just let Cedric go. The Orange team goes to Tribal first, and Say's vote is unfortunately blocked by Mitch. Anonymously and unfortunately, Say is going to be unanimously voted out, which was very depressing to watch and to see a big character like her go out just shy of the jury. Then for the Purple team, despite all this big talk about Shaheen being a threat that needs to be taken out, that chance was never taken and Cedric still ended up being the unanimous boot. So now after a dreaded double elimination, the two teams reunite together, and Chrissy, who was from the first team, does apologize for a little spiel that she went on during Tribal, which is that she acknowledged how the Strong Boys would need to be targeted eventually, which although she does try to apologize following up to it, it does not erase from their minds, and they do pin a target on Chrissy moving forward. Then we learn the big group has established themselves a majority, pulling in Mary as a sixth, thanks to David, since they now have a game relationship going, which although is good to have more numbers, Shaheen is someone who's very wary of Mary. So then afterwards, the players compete in the immunity challenge, where once again it's the mega challenge, meaning they go through a pairs phase first, and then an individual portion where it's only 4 competing against each other. And in addition to that, the 2 pairs who will lose the first challenge will have their vote revoked until they have the chance to restore it again. So let's cut to the chase. Camilla, Shaheen, Star, and Mitch are among the 2 pairs that lose the first phase and have lost their votes at that moment, while the pairs of Joe and Eva and David and Mary make it to the final stage, where Eva comes out on top and wins immunity, thus also winning reward alongside her competitors. So for the people who lost their votes, they compete in a very interesting challenge requiring precision to avoid losing, and unfortunately Star fell victim to it and officially lost her vote while the others have restored theirs. Then during reward, Eva finds a little scroll in her food and secretly grabs it for herself. Furthermore, the people on the reward discuss about their plan being to vote for Chrissy. However, David and Mary have an idea of their own in targeting Camilla, since they've seen how close she's gotten with who they believe is Shaheen. And Joe and Eva are not opposed to the plan. Meanwhile at camp, Chrissy throws out Joe's name to Kyle, and he quickly retells this to Joe when he comes back from reward. And it's also when he learns that his ally Camilla is being targeted by David and Mary. So without exposing his relationship, he softly fights back against the plan and tries to push for Chrissy to be the vote. And he also reports to Camilla that she's in danger because of David, which she is resentful at David for. So yeah, for this big group, it becomes a very messy debate between Camilla and Chrissy, and David and Mary just continue pushing for Camilla while Kyle just fights back against it alongside Shaheen as well, which leaves Joe and Eva in the middle, and their say will ultimately dictate who the group is going to vote out. And at Tribal, by Joe and Eva's commands, it looks like they landed on Chrissy, and Chrissy is unanimously voted out. So after that, Kyle is delighted that Camilla survived, but has lost a lot of trust with David and Mary, and Shaheen has the same feeling about them too. David and Mary do notice the commotion between Shaheen and Kyle's relationship with Camilla, which they starting to express their paranoia about, which they bring it to the attention of Eva and Joe, who don't really take it that serious and think that they're just being paranoid. But then the next night, we have a follow-up with Eva's advantage, where now she goes and sneaks off to find what her advantage is. And while she sneaks off, Shaheen finds out it was her and tries to inform Joe about it, which he reassures that it's okay because he knows Eva is someone that's very trustful, and he's totally right. But anyway, with Eva's business, she walks up to a table where there's an empty parchment on it, which is an extra vote that she's offered up. However, she can take a risk of her extra vote and earn a safety without power instead. And she goes YOLO, let's play, and she gets the safety without power. But then she's offered another chance and an advantage, and this time she forbids that and now heads back with a safety without power, meaning she has an immunity idol and disadvantage. And because she is so trustful, she relays this to Kyle, Shaheen, and Joe. Next, not much is happening besides David and Mary expressing their worry about Camilla's relationship with Kyle and Shaheen, and then that's when David chats with Joe and Eva, where he comes off a bit passive-aggressive to them, and he doesn't help with his case when he tells Joe that he went back on his word, which definitely now turned Joe off against David. So then we get to a very critical immunity challenge, and it's a showdown between David and Joe again, where Joe is nearly on the edge of losing, But then suddenly, David just drops out like that. So Joe has immunity. So now, the players strategize for the vote, and David and Mary choose to land a target on Mitch, considering it's an easy vote to counter any sort of idol Kyle or Shaheen could potentially have to save Camilla. And Star is on board with their plan too. But everyone else has now been wanting to split up Mary and David, where although Mary's name has been floating around as a target, they eventually decided to just go for the big boy in David. And especially now that Joe was repulsed by how David came at him during that previous conversation, he and Diva are definitely on board to take David out. So then the vote commences, and David is indeed going to be the blindside victim tonight, with Mary and Star being left out of the vote. With David gone now, Mary and Star on the bottom. But they try to rope in Camilla as a number and plan to work on Mitch, and maybe the four of them can vote together to target Joe, because he is the heart of the majority alliance that has been dominating the post-merge so far. But there is some iffiness if Camilla and Mitch are willing to side with the girls. And we do see Star trying to campaign to Mitch on getting rid of Joe. However, Mitch is willing to be on board if it was anyone outside of Star. So with it being Star presenting the plan to him, he's definitely not siding with her, which, are you kidding me, Mitch? And then we see Camilla spill to Kyle about the upcoming plan to get Joe out, and he's willing to let it happen, but he doesn't want to be the one directly doing it because he's already ruining his jury management prospects. So then the players go to reward, and this is the kind of content that we are getting, which is Jeff listing out the food and then starting to chant the words fried chicken and waffles, and then getting the castaways to sing it too. And do you know what I think about this moment? Yeah, thanks, Liz. Anyways, Kyle wins rewards and brings along Shaheen, Eva, and Camilla, and they enjoy their fried chicken and waffles. Meanwhile, with the people left behind, Joe tries to work on his jury management with Mary, and instead he's just kind of talking her down, which definitely is not a good look for his jury management. So then it's time for immunity, and despite the amount of fails, Joe is able to win his third individual immunity. Good for him. So now back at camp, Mitch and Camilla back out on siding with Star and Mary, and they are siding with the majority who are planning to vote out one of those two. Star and Mary do recognize their positions and plan to vote for each other too, so it's really up to the debate between the two. And we do continually see sequences of Mary shooting herself in the foot, which seems to be leading to her inevitable downfall. However, Star is still someone that people want to kick out too. And with Star, knowing that her position is on the line, she reflects on it by making a rap about it. And she's got bars, much more than Chris Noble, I should say. But anyways, the vote count is close between Mary and Star, but unfortunately, Star is the one to take the fall for tonight's tribal council. So after Star is out, Mary's gonna be the next to go. And she tries to put up a fight in pitching Joe as a big threat, which does have some effect to Camilla and Mitch, who seem to consider the flip, but they just need one more number. And Camilla does try to work on Kyle, and he's open to the move. However, Mary, with the amount of anger she has with her game position, decides to be spiteful a bit and chop up to the remaining coconut without saving some of the rations, and this does irritate most of the tribe, especially Eva. Like, Eva, we've seen you eat every day! Okay, afterwards, somebody is going to go on a journey, and Eva is the one to go, selected by a rock draw. So, on her journey, she needs to restore her vote, and if she wants to go further, she can try to earn a knowledge is power advantage. Welcome back. The worst advantage ever for a gameplay standpoint. But anyways, Eva does complete the vote restore phase of the challenge, and does slightly try to go further for the knowledge is power when it's like, you have all the advantages. You don't have to be greedy for it, which she recognizes and backs out. So that's good on her. And she tells everyone what just happened. And next, they compete in another immunity where Joe almost wins, with Jeff almost says it, but he mistakes himself and correctly declares Camilla as the immunity winner. And she brings over Eva and Mitch with her so they can enjoy reward. And her strategy here is to actually try making Eva and Joe comfortable enough so that they could try executing their attempted flip against Joe. And we see Mary try to put in her work to get the votes onto Joe, and it does seem like it's going to happen, but it's still pretty up in the air, while Joe's side is obviously going to be targeting Mary. But then after the reward people return, we see Camilla and Kyle have a conversation where they want to guarantee at least one of them being in the final threes. So the decision that they're going to make is what's best going to ensure that they make it to the final three spots. So then Mary has one more trick up her sleeve, which is blatantly telling Joe that she's going to vote for him so that it can make him feel paranoid that she might have some sort of immunity on her. And he begins to express a bit of his paranoia about what Mary had just said to him, but his allies just reassure him that he's alright. And when they vote, his allies are right, and everyone unanimously votes out Mary, which is such a devastating elimination for her. And then we return back to camp where the four-person alliance seems to remain solid on going to the end, taking out Mitch and Camilla next. But Kyle has been working with his secret relationship with Camilla for so long, and the both of them think it's time for a move to be made. So then reward happens, and Shaheen hangs on the longest and wins it. And so he brings along Kyle and Joe, where they enjoy a feast alongside some love letters. And then we have Shaheen floating the idea of potentially striking at Joe and Eva, wanting to go for the latter first, and he does briefly chat with Kyle about this, which gives Kyle enough ammunition to paint a target onto him. So the reward people return to camp, and we have Kyle and Camilla chat about a move to make on Shaheen. And they're going to pitch to Joe and Eva this fake story of Shaheen having an idol and showing it to Camilla. But they're going to wait on that pitch because it's time for immunity, and Joe smokes everyone, winning his 4th immunity. So now back at camp, Joe's alliance seemed to be set on voting Mitch out next. However, Kyle and Camilla finally begin the execution of their plan to throw Shaheen under the bus, which Camilla is really good at throwing people under the bus. First Charity, now Shaheen. So first we have Kyle pitching to Joe that Shaheen flipped, which is partially true, but the fabrication is the part where Shaheen showed Camilla his idol, which he doesn't even have one. But Joe seems to buy into it and starts to grow paranoid. When it's like, dude, you're immune this round, so don't be as panicky in this spot. But Joe does start contemplating on if he should believe this or is he being deceived. So he does talk with Eva about this, and she's equally as conflicted with Joe on who to believe, but she's likely trusting Kyle on this spot. And then it is Camilla's turn to contribute to the plan, where she talks on her side of her pitch against Shaheen to Joe, and he starts believing it. And so with that, his next conversation with Shaheen is him being very stern with his conversation with him, which Shaheen does pick up some of the attitude and begins to sense something off with his vibe, which Joe doesn't really take lightly and just withdraws himself from the conversation, really confusing Shaheen, and he starts confronting everyone else about the off-ramp behavior Joe is displaying, which, dude, by knowing that, you should probably realize that something must have gotten into his head about you. So by now, the players go to tribal council and they cast their votes, and boom, Eva and Joe do flip on Shaheen, blindsiding him, with Camilla voting for Mitch just to avoid exposing her relationship with Kyle. So with that, I guess Jelinski's miss got onto the players' heads, and they finally recognized Beard Guy as a threat and voted him out. And now to the final stretch of the season, which this round in particular I can just breeze through quickly. So there's an advantage that the players could earn if they're able to crack the code, and Eva does so, earning her an advantage in the immunity challenge, but that doesn't matter because she ended up sucking on it, and Camilla win with an epic comeback. So although there was an opportunity for Joe to be targeted, Kyle and Camilla simply didn't want to, and they'd rather take out the easy vote in Mitch, which everyone blatantly tells him that he's going, and nothing changes, so Eva plays her idol on herself because obviously, and Mitch ends up being the final 5 boot. Let's just move on. So during the preparation for the final immunity, Camilla tells Kyle that they cannot sit with each other in the final 3, and they compete in submission with whatever, and Kyle wins final immunity, earning his spot to the end. And because of the tip that Camilla gave him prior to the challenge, he unfortunately has to target her this round, so he plans to bring Joe to the end with him, meaning Eva and Camilla are going to be facing off in the fire-making showdown. Which there is a point that Kyle does consider taking out Camilla himself so it can boost his resume, but he backs out. And his spot was motivated by the sight of Eva struggling, which Joe has to comfort her. And so afterwards, Kyle declares his decision to take Joe to the final 3, and we get the fire-making showdown between Camilla and Eva, which Camilla for some reason couldn't even get a spark, while Eva got one, but then her fire went down, which caused her to freak out a bit. But thanks to Joe, she calmed down a bit and was able to get her fire to burn the rope, earning her the final spot, meaning unfortunately Camilla is the last person to be eliminated. So we get the final 3 of Eva, Joe, and Kyle, where they're now going to be faced with the jury and make their pleas for why they should win. And although Joe was hyped up to be such a big threat to the end game, he somehow bombed his final tribal, not even saying much, which Eva does way more arguments and actually does sway some of the jury votes thanks to showing off her somewhat secret safety without power advantage that expired at the final 7. But the biggest turning point was when Camilla vouched for Kyle, especially in his argument for the Shaheen blindside that he and his now revealed undercover alliance with Camilla orchestrated with. It really was an effective pitch. And so the jury casts their votes, and for the first time since HHH, all 3 finalists at least got a vote, and the winner of Survivor 48 is Kyle Fraser. Congratulations to him. And we surprisingly have Eva getting second, and shockingly Joe being third. But who cares, because Kyle single-handedly beat a public duel in the final 3. So everyone comes and celebrates Kyle's victory, and that culminates the story of Survivor 48. So that wraps up everything, and now for my thoughts on the season, and that it was meh. Again, the pre-merge was somewhat strong, but then we get to the post-merge, and it just dragged. Like seriously, we wanted a big move, and each episode, this hype up for a big move was all null and void. Like from the stretch from when Chrissy was booted all the way to Mary's elimination, it was just so stagnant in terms of gameplay. I'll say the mirror is that the edit did trick everyone thinking Joe was gonna win, but Kyle would be victorious instead, and so at least I like the value of trying to shock the audience a bit so the result isn't too obvious. But despite that, it doesn't really help propel the season to be any better, and for me, I think I can have the argument that this is probably the worst New Era season by far. Like 44 is equally bad, but I feel it didn't have a long stretch of boring episodes like this season had. And I am kind of disappointed that this season wasn't particularly great, as we were on a good run of Survivor seasons since 45, and it was such a strong resurgence that lasted for 3 good seasons, but this season really just seized that streak, and that's very disappointing. So yeah, 48 definitely not the ideal season to enjoy, and although there was some strong points throughout it, I definitely don't think they helped bolster the season any better. So that's what I think. So for the semi-ranking, for the person who earns the best player of the season, I think after this finale has cemented for me, it's Kyle. Because he had one solid game, although wonky at that one tribal where he needed an idol to save himself, I do think he displayed a lot of social abilities and relationships that brought him far into the game, with no one really considering even striking at him at all. And for him to be able to beat a public duo at the end, especially how much their strengths in their game they had, it definitely elevates why I think Kyle played a very impressive game, so I'm definitely putting him at the top here. And now for the player with the worst game, and guess what? It's another player from the Siva tribe who happens to be the first boot of Siva, which was Charity, obviously the person voted out at Merge. And I think Charity just played a very horrendous game, because he saw in any given tribal council she would attend, she would have been gone. And plus also, no one was willing to bring her in as a number, considering no one wanted to align with her because of how much she overplayed her hands. And although she had one real close relationship with Mitch, it's just Mitch, who's also bad too. So really, Charity had no merits to her game, and I can tell she's definitely on the bottom of any other Survivor YouTubers ranking, so I would definitely agree as well. So yeah. So the last thing is that I want to reflect on the prediction video that I made months back, and looking back at it, I did pretty okay with my predictions. Obviously, this season did not live up to the potential, so yeah. And some things in particular, I predicted extremely wrong. Like, literally the first 2 boots of the season got highlighted in the promo, which to be fair, 47 did the same thing with its first 3 boots, but that was mostly circumstantial because the preview aired during filming. Whereas at this point, it kind of sets a new norm for Survivor previews moving forward, as even if you get highlighted, you're not particularly safe for being a shocking early boot, even first, like we see with Kevin and Stephanie. And speaking of Kevin, I was totally wrong thinking Mary was the one who fainted in the promo, when in reality, she collapsed because Kevin injured his shoulder, which I mentioned was cut from the show. Everyone else in the prediction, I was somewhat right of, but that was pretty much it. And also, Kyle didn't even get highlighted in the season preview at all, so that really shifted things up a bit, which I am of 2 minds of, where it doesn't make an obvious storyline, but on the other hand, it doesn't give us a proper introduction to the eventual winner, considering they didn't get a significant highlight in the season preview. So I am up on the air in where I lean towards. But anyways, reflecting on how I was predicting this season would be, I was just okay, having somewhat correct reads, but others not being completely 100% either. So that is it, and I appreciate you all tuning in to watch me review Survivor 48. Thank God the season's over, and now we can move on to hopefully better seasons of Survivor, which hopefully 49 is, and maybe AU vs. the World that's coming up soon. So I'm getting around to covering that. So thanks each and every one of you, and I'll see you all in another video.